Okay, so we are continuing our football club history series. We're going to Switzerland for a few videos today. We're starting in Geneva with Servette FC. Now, this club was actually initially founded solely as a rugby club in 1890. Rugby league wasn't a thing at this point, so we just call it rugby. The football section of the club comes along in 1900. That's where most of the club's successes come from, and we're obviously focusing on the football section. They play at the Stade de Geneva, which has a capacity of 30,084. Big stadium in Switzerland, as Swiss stadiums go, one of the biggest. Big fan base as well, Geneva being one of the big cities in Switzerland. Now, before we get into the ups and downs the club has had and their actual honours in how they've won them, I will say this: they've won 17 league titles, 7 Swiss Cups and 3 Swiss League Cups, which is a record for the League Cups there. So they're a very, very successful side. However, their last trophy came in 2001. So there's been a period where they've had some financial issues over the last 20 or so years. They haven't won any silverware for 23 years. Yeah, it's been a bit of a dry spell for the club. They've been very, very successful, pretty regularly winning trophies until the early 2000s when money problems hit. I'm going to quickly talk about their UEFA team ranking and coefficient. I'm not a fan of how the coefficient works. Never have been. I'm not a fan of the Cup Winners' Cup disappearing and the current structure and the proposed new structures for the Champions League, Europa League and Europa Conference League. I think it does hamper those what we call lesser leagues outside the Big Five or the Big Seven if you include the Dutch and the Portuguese league. The Swiss league's pretty competitive league, and when I go through all the Swiss clubs and you look where all the silverware's gone, you'll find it's actually a very, very competitive league. Considering Servette have not won the league title since 1999, and they have 17 of them, considering FC Zurich only have 10, they're not doing bad when it comes to winning silverware in their history. The coefficient and the team ranking BS, not a fan of it, but that's the system UEFA have. So UEFA ranked them as at 212th as of the end of last season with a coefficient of 6.335. So they're ranked higher than SK Bryan that we did a video on yesterday in Norway by quite a few places. SK Bryan were ranked at 267 with a coefficient of 4.5. So they're 2 coefficient points higher and 50 odd places higher in the ranking of teams across Europe. But let's delve into it. Before we go into their honours section, let's have a look at some of the money problems they've had in recent years. They're a very successful club from foundation all the way through till the late 90s, early 2000s. But then they're relegated to the Swiss 3rd Division in 2005 because they went bankrupt. They basically ran out of money, which will surprise a lot of people because Switzerland is a very wealthy country with a high average salary, lots of disposable income and lots of very wealthy people. The club, bankrupt. Club bankrupt, and the Swiss have a great footballing history as well. So they're not the only club to have had money problems in Switzerland. So early to mid 2000s, before the financial crash, Servette run out of money. So they're outside the top flight until the 2011-2012 season. They don't stay in the top flight very long because they're relegated back out the top flight the following season after struggling in the 2012-2013 season. So money is still an issue at this point. They're still struggling. They don't get back to the top flight until the 2018-2019 season. However, in the 2022-2023 season, which is last season as I'm recording this video, they finished 2nd in the league. So things are starting to look bright again for Servette. They look likely to be challenging for silverware soon. So things are starting to turn around, but it's been a 2-decade struggle to turn things around, and even longer since they last won silverware, which was in 2001. Now let's get into their silverware, and you can see how regularly they win silverware. What is very, very interesting is, I think, looking at the silverware overall, the 70s is, in my opinion, the 20s and the 70s are their 2 best decades. That's where they win most of their silverware, but it's pretty regular. Every decade or so, a few trophies come in. So they're winning quite regularly. They're not dominant, but they're very, very competitive alongside Grasshopper and Basel and FC Zurich, for example, and Young Boys in Bern. They're quite regularly competing for titles across the board, but the 70s they win a lot, if you look at all their trophies. And the 20s as well was a very successful decade for the most part, where they're one of the top sides. But let's break it down. So the Swiss Super League, or Swiss Championship as it was once known, they win their first league title after only 7 years as a football club in 1906, 1907. So they're a very, very strong side from the beginning. A little bit of a gap until their next one, 1917, 1918. But you can see that they're winning at least once a decade, if not more. The 20s, they have a good spell in the 20s. The 21-22 season, they win their third, 24-25, 25-26, 29-30. So they win a fair bit in the 20s. The 30s is very, very similar. A little bit less successful in the 32-33 season and the 33-34 seasons. They have a habit of winning back-to-back titles. And they win in the 1939-1940 season. A bit of a gap, the 1945-46 season, and then the 1949-1950 season. The 50s is a down period for the club. No silverware after the 1949-1950 season in any competition. They start winning again in the early 60s, in the 60-61 season, and then 61-62. That's some of their trophies in the 60s. In fact, their only trophies in the 60s for that matter. So there's a little purple patch at the beginning of what we would class more of the modern era now. This is where the World Cup is starting to gain in popularity. And a certain Pele is starting to play on a global stage. Young Beckenbauer, the Busby Babes, that kind of thing. Football is starting to evolve into the more modern era that we know today. But then they only win one league title in the 70s, in the 78-79 season. They win one in the 80s, in the 84-85 season. Two in the 90s, the 93-94 season and the 98-99 season. So that's their last league title. The money problems are starting to appear in the late 90s, early 2000s. But as you can see, pretty regular with the titles, very competitive side. The Swiss Cup, the story is pretty similar. Very good team in the 70s, early 80s in the Swiss Cup. So they win their first Swiss Cup in the 20s, in the 27-28 season. Bit of a gap until the late 40s in the 48-49 season when they win their second. Then they win three in the 70s, the 70-71 season, the 77-78 and 78-79 season. So the 70s, especially later on, pretty good in the Swiss Cup. They win a fair few trophies in that decade. They win one trophy in the 80s and the 83-84 season in the Swiss Cup. And then their last ever trophy the club won was in the 2001 season in the Swiss Cup, which was their final Swiss Cup out of 7. The Swiss League Cup, however, they had a very dominant spell in the mid to late 70s, which they get their League Cup record. They win in the 76-77 season, the 78-79 season, and the 79-80 season. So, pretty successful side. However, the money issues, and it's taken a very, very long time to recover from those financial difficulties. A story repeated across Europe with a whole multitude of football clubs. So there we go. There's a brief look at the history of Servette FC, based in Geneva, one of the biggest clubs in Switzerland. Solid fan base, nice big stadium, and a very, very successful side. One of the most successful sides in Swiss football. Just shows how competitive the Swiss League is. That's the fourth team, and you can see quite a few titles are being shared around here. There's not one single club that is totally dominant in any area, although Grasshoppers have won the most Super League and Swiss Cups. Servette have won the most League Cups. So you can see that not all the records are held by one club, which is good. And there's a good level of competitiveness. Now, we're going to look at Young Boys. Yes, they have the most unfortunate name from Bern, and they do play at the Wankdorf, which is a very unfortunate name for a stadium. But they're another very successful club, and they're one of the top clubs in Switzerland right now. And then we're going to start looking at some of the lesser Swiss clubs as we go on. But the Swiss League is highly interesting to look at. I want to say thank you very much for getting to the end of this video. Please hit like and subscribe if you like what you've seen. And place a comment in the comment section below. And we'll have some more content for you guys very, very soon.